Okay, it looks like our internet is back up again.
Excuse me.
Hey, Jonathan, podium mic will work if needed.
Check. Can you hear us?
Yes. Who said that?
All right, Tom, I think we are all systems a go on this end.
All right.
And Veronica, before we kick things off, you've got John Sneed as a member here, Holly Childs, Lieutenant Nichols, myself, City Manager Tony Cottle, and Chief Williams in the house here.
Okay.
Well, if we're ready, we can, I guess, call the meeting to order. Veronica, if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. And we'll call the meeting to order. And I guess first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from March. If I could get a motion for that.
So moved. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Do we have any public there that we would hear public comments from? Chance?
Can you hear me, Tom? No, sir.
Yep. Do we have any folks there to give public comments?
No public comments.
All right, then we'll move down to our new business and the FY23 MSD budget and WDI officers additions. So I'll turn it over to you, Chance.
Thanks, Tom. Before I hand it over to Chief Williams and City Manager Cottle, I'll just kind of start this thing up real quick, just to review what I sent out to the group in email form and what city staff is recommending through the city's budget process this year is a recommendation come from WPD for an addition of 5 officers added to their downtown task force, really based upon the overall density growth of the CBD and MSD geographic area over the last few years. Within this increase, the recommendation from staff is to fund 2 of these 5 additional officers from the MSD funds, with an additional 1 cent increase to the MSD tax for next fiscal year to fund 1 of the 2. There's already funding within the current funding levels to fund 1 of these 2 additional officers. And I'll get into the nuts and bolts afterwards, but I just want to hand it over to Chief Williams just to kind of talk through what the recommendation is, you know, what WPD is seeing downtown, and kind of give a much more detailed narrative as to what we're looking to do here. Should be able to.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Just want to give you a quick overview of how the city is set up and how downtown plays into that. Currently, we have 6 police districts. District 1, which is the north side of the city. District 2, which is the east side of the city up into Kerr Avenue. District 3, which runs from, say, Market Street over to Greenfield Street. District 4, which is the south side of the city. District 5, which will be your Walmart, South College Road area. And then District 6, which is your far South College Road area as you're getting down towards Monkey Junction. Currently, we have a 148 people assigned to our uniform patrol division. Somewhere around 135 of those folks, minus a few supervisors, are assigned to our 6 patrol platoons. And these 6 patrol platoons are responsible for patrolling those areas. For example, District 1 is broken down into 2 sub-districts that we call beats. District 2 is broken down into two sub-districts. District 3 is broken down into 2. District 4 is broken down into 2. District 5 is actually broken down into 3. And then District 6 is broken down into 2. And ideally, we try to have patrol officers and supervisors working each one of those beats. And the goal is for them to try to stay in those beats and get to know the city. But the reality of it is, if one side of the city backs up, we start moving these folks around to wherever we need to move them to. Now, downtown is not included in that. It's its own separate district, along with our Wilmington Housing Authority properties. Now, what makes Wilmington Housing Authority unique is the Housing Authority pays half of the salaries for those officers, and we have some deputies assigned in a task force agreement. And the housing task force, they move around to the different housing communities, which would be Houston Moore, Hillcrest, Rankin Terrace, Creekwood, Vesta Village, and a few other communities. We try to do community policing, but it's real hard when they're moving around the city, just like we try to do it with patrol. Now, downtown is very unique in that it is our true community policing portion of the city, where those officers geographically basically stay within that area. And when I talk about downtown, we talk about from bridge to bridge, from Fifth Avenue to the river. We also, for crime statistics, we have the CBD, the Central Business District, which is 3rd Street from bridge to bridge to the river. So these 13 officers that we have assigned in this area, they basically stay within this area. Now, to give you a breakdown of the 13, we have a lieutenant, Lieutenant Nichols, we have 1 sergeant, we have 1 officer that is assigned to the courthouse, and we keep that officer within that unit, and then we have our 3 mounted officers, and the rest of those officers are actually assigned to patrol the downtown area, including the 3 mounted officers. Now, over the past couple of years, we are starting to see tremendous growth downtown, which is a great thing, and we kind of knew that this was coming several years ago with the marina, the construction, the opening of the park. It's just great for downtown because it is a tourist attraction, and that's what we want people to do, is come here and enjoy our city, enjoy our downtown community. Some of the issues that we are really starting to see is an uptick in the unsheltered population. And after Hurricane Florence came through, a lot of people lost homes, and that community is actually starting to grow, and there are some side effects to that that we need to work through. Luckily, most of the issues with the unsheltered population, they're going to be quality of life issues. Then there's the downtown bar life scene. And COVID, when it hit, it was bad for us as a nation, but it made things real easy for downtown that year because everything was shut down. And we saw a tremendous reduction in crime. And the reason the crime reduced because we didn't have bar life for a year. So in 2020, even though our homicides went up throughout the city, a lot of our other crimes came down, and that was one of our lowest crime years in the over the past 10 years. So last year, when things started to open back up, crime started to pick back up downtown, and the reason being, we call it the COVID bounce. We're going from everything being shut down to everything opening back up, and we're already starting to see some increases there. But the good thing is, a lot of it is property crimes. And I don't know if you've been paying attention nationwide, but people have gone gun crazy. Everybody's carrying illegal firearms for some reason. And we have recovered quite a few firearms throughout the city to include the downtown district. At the end of the day, police cannot do it alone. And the 3 times that I've stood before council and presented these crime statistics, normally in January, the Wilmington Police Department refuses to take credit for these crime reductions. I purposely say this is not a us, this is a we effort. It takes all of us to make our community a safe and vibrant place to live, and of course we want visitors to come in and enjoy the benefits of this community. So I hope I just gave you a brief overview of how the city functions and where downtown fits in all of that. And right now, just to give you an idea on our staffing numbers, we are down about 19 vacancies. And because of the support from the folks that are normally sitting up there, that city council, we were able to raise our minimum salary, and I think that we're going to fully be able to get fully staffed, or as close to fully staffing as we've been. I've been there almost 30 years, and we've only been fully staffed maybe 1 or 2 times, and only lasts for about a week or 2 because people are constantly coming and moving. But being down 20 positions, that is an anomaly. In addition to the 20 positions we're down, I have 10 that are in the academy. Actually, let me correct that, 11 that are in the academy, and I have another 10 that are in field training. And then you start throwing in the FMLAs, the militaries. We're probably at about 45 to 50 bodies down. But I am very confident that we'll get those numbers back up in a year, and we'll be fully deployable, and then we can get out here and really work with our community to make a difference. Any questions for me at this time? Well, I will say this, thank you for having me, and we really thank the downtown community for supporting the men and women of the Wilmington Police Department. You really have some heroes out there, and Mike Rowe's show, How America Works, is going to air Monday night at 8 o'clock, and I really want you to look at that show. It'll be on Fox Nation, because we were chosen out of 17,000 law enforcement agencies nationwide to represent the law enforcement profession. And you'll see some shots from downtown during the holiday parade. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Chief. Good afternoon, folks. I just wanted to give you some background on how we got to the point that we are at with regard to the proposed budget. Donnie and his staff have previously done staffing analysis for downtown that have shown the need for additional officers, and over the course of the past 4 or 5 years, we've not been able to keep up with the pace that they had recommended with regard to meeting the needs in terms of additional business growth, additional residential growth, et cetera. This year, when he came to us with a big number, and we asked him to pare it down, and he got it down to 5 positions. When we did the analysis on it, we figured that we could probably add 3 through the general fund, and came back to the fact that the MSD was originally formed for 2 particular reasons. One was for safety, and the other was for cleanliness. We recognize that it may not be pleasurable or preferable on your part to recommend an additional 2 police officers be funded out of this revenue source, but we do believe it's the most equitable way in which to do this. While it's been pointed out that it represents over a quarter of the revenue that is brought in by the MSD, I'll point out that the chief just said he had 131 patrol officers, of which about 13 are delegated to the downtown. That represents 10% of his patrol force that's dedicated to downtown. And I know that value and size is not necessarily the best way in which to evaluate this, but that's for an area that has less than 1% of the area of the city that is incorporated, and then it also has less than 4% of the tax base. And you're getting about 10% of the police patrol force down there. With the additional 5 officers, you'll be getting about 17 or 18% of the patrol force that will be focused in downtown. Probably the most important thing about funding these 2 positions with the MSD money is that they will be guaranteed to be downtown. As the chief just mentioned, there are flexibility issues that are sometimes necessary. You have an emergency in one part of the city. Most of the time on the weekends, that's downtown where they need the additional officers. And sometimes they have to bring them out of downtown to be able to work on particular areas or particular projects. In this case, these 2 officers would be dedicated to the MSD downtown full-time. And there would not be any variance from that with regard to the funding and the mechanism with which these officers are provided on the street. So with that, I will tell you that my recommended budget that is being prepared at this time will go forward to council with 2 officers being funded from the MSD and 3 from the general fund, all 5 of which will then be dedicated to the downtown task force, which will bring the total number up to 15. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have if you have any.
I have a question. Bill, Brian, has the MSD ever funded any municipal position?
Pardon me?
Has the MSD ever funded any municipal, any city position?
I'm sorry, I am not I'm not
Have you ever used our funds to support any municipal position?
paying city staff.
He is asking, have you ever used any of the MSD funds for any of the municipal positions in the past?
Thank you. No, none of the MSD funds currently go to any positions that are on the city staff.
I have a question, Mr. Harvey. To finance one of the 2 officers, there would be a proposed tax rate on the businesses and residents. Has that tax rate ever been increased in the past?
No, ma'am.
Since the formation?
No, ma'am. It actually got decreased with the last evaluation and taken down in accordance with the overall growth as a result of the reevaluation, but never an increase. No, ma'am.
Thank you.
But to clarify, this 1 cent would put us back at where we started, correct?
It'll put it back close to it, yes, sir. For all intents and purposes, it'll put it back 6 point some few cents. So it'll be, all intents and purposes, almost 7 cents, yes, sir.
Right.
I have a question regarding revenue sharing. I mean, about a week ago, the New Hanover County government talked about having a budget surplus. And how is the revenue sharing going on between the city of Wilmington and New Hanover County? And the other question I would have would be, how much does the county sheriff participate in downtown activity?
The county sheriff, I'll answer those in reverse order. The county sheriff's department supplies 5 additional bodies for the downtown task force. So that brings it to a total of currently of 18. And then the 5, of course, that we're adding to it will bring it to 22. So he does supply 5 officers in that initiative. In terms of county revenue sharing, there is no really county revenue sharing. We participate on some individual projects where the city pays for a portion, county pays for a portion, and the sales tax that is paid predominantly by folks and businesses that are within the city generally gets divided up such that most of the revenue winds up going to the county as opposed to the city.
Okay, thank you.
Tony, this is Terry. One thing I know we're going to have some pushback from not only the property owners, but the business owners, because they are taxed as well as in the MSD structure. And one thing I don't think many people are aware of, as a property owner in downtown Wilmington, the rent rates downtown are significantly lower than, say, Leland, Barclay, out by Mayfair. We're seeing rent rates generated in those areas. I mean, at the Walmart Center in Leland, it's $43 a foot before TICAM. We're doing good to get $25 a foot downtown. Same thing with revenues with restaurants, and Ray can probably speak to that as well. The restaurants, the larger restaurants out further away generate more revenue. I mean, I'm familiar with one restaurant, Carolina Beach right now, is generating over $4 million a year, and you don't hear that often downtown. So I know there's going to be rumblings from their standpoint that they're already feeling some stress, even though most of the businesses are reporting they've had their best revenue year ever. It didn't mean the profits were the best because of labor and material and food costs. So and I'm sure you guys have already thought about this, but I'm already getting phone calls. Somehow this is sneaking out and the word's on the street.
And we're very well aware of that, Terry. It is a difficult budget for us. We are going to recommend increases across the board. No one will be immune to this. As a result, we are suffering from many of the same supply and labor issues that you're suffering from, and we're acutely aware of the burden that it places.
Mr. Caudle, if I may, again, and I'm sorry I called you Mr. Harvey, one brief distinction might be that the private businesses, you know, they didn't have continuing salary during COVID as compared to government employees funded by taxpayers. So I don't think everyone's suffering equally, but one of the big things the committee's done is we've funded the position for Jack Wood. And he's gotten a lot of good press, well-deserved, for being the WDI outreach coordinator. And that's an expensive salary, and he's doing great work. It might seem he's taking some of the burden off of the police force, and I was wondering if that could be monetized as already sort of a contribution in kind to policing that's already being paid by the district.
We certainly could look at that number. I'm not familiar enough with it to be able to tell you yes or no at this point in time. I will say that, did I hit something? I hit something here. I will say that the primary reason for this, let me see if I can fix this. The primary reason for the additional police officers is growth. We've got 4 additional hotels downtown. We've got 5 or 6 large apartment complexes, and the existing staff is just getting stretched too thin. I don't know that the position to which you refer actually would assist the police department in safety issues, but we certainly could investigate that.
Thank you.
Tony, this is Nancy Bullock. Would these officers also be patrolling or helping with, is Live Nation and the park included in their duties?
I don't know. I'll have to ask the chief that question. Chief?
No, they will not. We require Live Nation to hire off-duty officers.
The chief advises that Live Nation is required to hire off-duty officers for those purposes. Thanks.
And one other question is, looking at the budget for these two officers, or exactly one, it seemed like that was not funded at all. A large portion of it was for equipment. And I don't know if that would be an ongoing thing. Every year you need new equipment, but that was a pretty hefty price tag that was included with the cost of the, in addition to the salary.
All equipment for both positions comes from the general fund. We are not asking the MSD to pay for any of that equipment or any of the outfit for those officers, only for salaries.
Okay. I misunderstood the graph then that I saw, because it spelled out all the equipment that was necessary. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
With regards to the Saturday music festivals that are going to be going on over a 16-week period, is that going to be handled by off-duty police as well?
Yes. The chief advises yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Caudle, is there any way to offset our increase and not have the increase? Can we change our budgets in different categories? For example, in the safety category, take away maybe 40,000 for that. And in the clean category, take away 40,000 there to offset the 81,000 that we need to fund the one extra police officer.
My understanding of the funding process with the city is that we pay WDI a certain amount of money for a certain level of services. If the city wanted to negotiate with WDI for a reduction in those services so that funding could be used for another purpose outside of their contract, we certainly could enter into those, but that's not something we've entertained at this point in time.
But it can be entertained at some time to offset the increase?
It could be entertained. Yes, it is a possibility. I don't know with the new contract, new proposed contract, and I'd have to ask Chance to address this, but with the newly proposed contract, I'm not sure that the flexibility is in there, but we'd have to talk to Chance and to the WDI folks.
Okay, like, for example, what Terry Espy said, the property owners have already seen an increase in taxes this past year with the new assessment. And to have another increase, it's, not going to sit well.
I understand.
So just
that.
trying to come up with another plan.
I understand.
Hey, Tony, Ray Worrell. I'm all about, it seems like the number one thing that we've heard from the public for the MSD is safety. It's always been the number one priority. And I think that, having more officers certainly downtown would be a great thing. I'm just a little skeptical about the slippery slope that they're going down. So downtown is already expanding more and more. So are we going to come back again and in the future and say, well, we need 4 more officers and it gets funded through the MSD? The other thing that I have a question about too is that with the MSD, it's my understanding that the funds can only be used in the MSD, and these officers, I think, from what it sounds like, are going to be used outside the MSD. There's a big difference between downtown and MSD geographically, and also where the money's coming from is such a small area. I'm kind of mixed. I definitely want more officers, but the funding part of it is, I'm just.
I understand, Ray. I understand. Let me try to quiet at least one of your concerns, which is if the officers are funded with MSD funds, they will not be allowed to work outside of the downtown MSD district, period. And the chief understands that. And I'm sorry, what was your first question? I lost it completely.
I guess the other concern that I have is that, that was my concern, was that the officers would work outside the MSD.
No, sir, they would be relegated to the MSD.
Okay. So with the MSD too, we can only enhance city services. So this would be enhancing the policing downtown. Okay.
Yes, sir. And with regard to that, if this proposal does not go through, it would be 3 officers. If council, for example, decided they wanted to put 3 general fund officers, the city's currently proposed budget only contains money for 3. So we're not supplanting anything here. These will be 2 additional officers. If indeed council decides to go through with 3, and then they wanted to raise the tax rate accordingly or find money from somewhere else in the budget, then they might be able to add those 2 in there. But at the current in the current proposal, those 2 would come from the MSD funding. And, to answer your first question, I'm sorry, thank you. The first question was about would we come back to the well again? And I've lived long enough in this world to know that you never say never. But I would also say that if given the tax rate that you're working with, the tax base that you're working with, I can't see us coming back to you, especially not anytime in the foreseeable future, for additional funding, simply because I think this would already represent such a large portion of your tax generated as a result of the levy of the rate. And that has not risen. The tax revenue from this MSD has not risen over the course of the past year or 2, simply because there are so many tax breaks that are being given to brownfield properties in the downtown district. So it's remained relatively flat. But again, I do not anticipate coming back to you for any additional officers. If we had to do that, I would say we'd have to go to the general fund to do it.
Mr. Cardo, I have to get off the call and go to the switch from the Zoom to the telephone soon. So I wanted to get one final question in, please.
Yes,
I guess the first is a comment. Chief mentioned you were 40 to 50 officers down, so hopefully there's some money in a pot somewhere. But Solomon Towers is not in the municipal service district, but I live very close to it, and they get hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of police responses every year, every single year. I've seen the reports. And that obviously is going to take people away from the MSD. And you mentioned officer funding is shared in part with the housing authority, which would be a sort of a government to government funding. Have you all approached the housing authority for additional officer payments?
I'll let the chief address it, but to my knowledge, we've worked under the existing contract with regard to the housing authority, but let's let the chief address that.
Thank you.
Yes, to answer your question about Solomon Towers, that's mainly handled by our housing task force. Unless it's a urgent emergency, downtown will assist then. And one other thing I wanted to add, in addition to the officers you get downtown on a Saturday night, we have a crew that is called the Mobile Field Force, and they mainly work our high crime areas. We bring all of them downtown typically on a Saturday night. The last hour of their shift, we bring all of them into downtown, and then those housing officers where we pay half of their salary, we bring them downtown also. And during the daytime, in addition to the officers you have assigned to downtown, if something urgent happens, we bring our District 1 officers over to downtown too. So the coverage is far more than the 13 that I've shared with you.
Thank you.
One other question. When do we anticipate the brownfields credits to lapse? When do we anticipate seeing property taxes generated down on the north end into the till?
That's a 5-year abatement, or well, actually it's not an abatement. It's a forgiveness of a portion, and it's escalating. It starts out the first year at, I want to say 10% or something like that, and then it's a 5-year sliding scale up to the point that they're paying 100% of them.
Mm-hmm. And this year's budget reflected some of the additional property tax from, say, Pier 33. Is that correct?
This year's budget, the revenue remains substantially flat. As a result of the Brownsfield, we'll see it go up approximately 25% perhaps next year, but it'll be a slow rise.
And am I to assume the additional apartment project, the group out of DC, Kettler, I think, they're under the same guidelines?
I believe they are, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If you have no further questions, I just wanted to thank you for your time and at least hearing me out. I understand that this is not preferable, and I understand the impact that it's going to have on a limited number of folks. But given the overall need from the city and the overall distribution of the workforce, I thought it was probably very appropriate. And I expect that the council will be expecting a recommendation from you with regard to that. And if you have any further questions, certainly please feel free to call me or the chief, either one, and we'll be glad to answer as many questions as we can.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
You know, it seems to me that, you know, as these brownfields, including where I'm living at River Place, those things go up in over 5 years, that there should be a substantial improvement on revenue streams. And I would hope and anticipate that as those revenue streams come online, that we'd be able to move this current request back to a normal funding and have MSD do what it's been doing over the last 3 years, and that is focusing on the good programs that have been working on successfully, whether it's the Ambassadors Program, this new outreach program. And I know that there was some concern recently that the New Hanover County Council was considering some drastic implementation that I guess they backed off of, at least temporarily, with regards to the homeless population. But that's going to be obviously it's going to be a big need to be addressed by the community, as outlined as well by the chief of police. So that's kind of my opinion from one just member, is I'm hoping that this anomaly over a period of time will basically come back to a more normal situation as the tax revenue base gets to where it would be at 100 level, because the growth of the city in the downtown area should be able to cope with a more robust, easier result. Thank you.
I agree with that.
We know when this will go before council?
Ray, was that you? Can you repeat that question, comment?
Yeah. Do we know when this will go before council?
Just through the budget process, correct?
The manager's budget will be introduced to council at the next meeting, which will be the first meeting in May. We'll have our public hearing at the second meeting in May, and then the first and second readings will be the meetings in June.
Okay. Chance, I have one more question for you. Did we verify that we were all good if we did decide to move forward with the recommendation from the city attorneys?
Yeah, and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe per general statute, the city may provide these services themselves, and within the downtown revitalization as it's defined in the general statute, I think this would definitely be considered, providing services or functions and to greater extent than those provided elsewhere in the city, as Chief outlined.
Okay.
I do think with the increase in the property tax on the north end that the potential there, the MSD taxes, we're already at our cap. It's not like we're going to see an increase until the next apartment project or until yours is open. Yeah. But I like the sliding scale, being able to revisit year after year, understanding this is an urgent situation right now, and let's look at it again next year.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Terry. Like we said, this is a stopgap, I think, for where we are right at this minute. But again, flats on front should be, they've been open for what, 2 years now? Mm-hmm. Give or take. So they should be coming off of that abatement or discount, as well as Pier 33 and some of the other ones. So yeah, I agree. I think it's just something that will catch up with itself here shortly, but the need is now, so.
Cannot fill their current vacancy. How are they going to fill these?
Hey, Bill, either you're muted or you're breaking up. We couldn't quite hear you.
I'm not muted, so it must be my computer. Can you hear me now?
We had you for a second, then we lost you, I believe.
I'm not sure where else to go. Can you hear it all?
Now we can.
We got you now.
If the police cannot fill the vacancies they have now, how are they going to fill 5 additional?
I can answer that a little bit, guys. We were at DBA meetings. The police, thank goodness, attend these meetings, so we're always getting a lot of good information. But kind of one of the comments that we had heard is that Wilmington is known for training the police, excellent training for police and fire, and then they go elsewhere for higher pay. So I think there was $7 million just recently allocated back to city employees. Hopefully that means that we're going to pay them enough to keep them and lure new people here.
If I might have the opportunity, I will say that the city council was gracious enough to go ahead and do an early implementation of a pay plan. We were dramatically underpaid, especially in our frontline positions, especially in public safety and in public works. So those pay increases should go into effect this week. Or perhaps the next pay period, I don't remember which. And it does make us much more competitive. I was out on MLK, I think, this morning or this afternoon sometime, and I saw where the sheriff had increased his pay as well. So you'll get this one upon another. But long story short is we do believe that we're more competitive now. And I will tell you kind of a funny story. The chief came in with a lot of requests. And one of the requests that he came in with were for additional traffic safety officers. And one of the things I told him is that was one of the things that's just going to have to wait until such time as we get some positions filled and then see how it goes. So we've got a balance of what we're trying to fill and what we're not trying to. But again, I think, as Terry mentioned, I think the rate increase, the pay increase will help substantially with that.
Are we voting today?
Yes, Elizabeth, I think that would be the preference for the committee to take a motion of support or not support.
Thank you, Jan. I'm almost at my children's school. I've probably got 5 to 10 minutes max. I'm sorry. If needed for quorum, I'm not sure.
I don't think so. Any other thoughts or comments?
Can we structure a motion with the carve back as the brownfields are set aside? Or does it have to be just support or not?
Terry, Chance here, I would say try to make it as clean as possible. And what I would say is we could revisit this each year as that tax base and allocation and that sliding scale changes as to what that rate ends up being each year and where any surplus or needs are.
And so let me see if I understand this correctly. If we decline or say no, we will still get 3 additional offices that the city general fund has approved. Is that correct?
Bobby, the way it's structured right now, the city's recommendation for the budget is 3 going to general fund, 2 being funded by the MSD, and
Okay.
that will be presented to council at its next meeting, and I'll let Tony clarify that.
The thing as a 40-year tenured manager, I'll tell you that nothing is certain that goes to council. And so what is going to them is the manager's recommended budget. What council does with it is entirely up to their purview.
And also to clarify, it doesn't really, whether we vote yay or nay, council really can do what they want at the end of the day.
Yes, sir, I would agree with that, but I would also say council respects this advisory committee's opinion and has pretty much gone along with pretty much everything you've asked for and suggested. But I will say that yes, sir, just like me, they're pretty much autonomous when it comes to their decision making.
I would just like to go along with what has already previously been stated. I have no problem going forward on the condition that when we revisit it we understand, or the city council understands, that this is not considered a normal process of the MSD. Up until now.
So as our budget already has included one additional officer, and we're just looking for the 1 cent on our taxes to pay for a second one, but we already are funding one. So we would have 4.
Well, we're not actually already funding one, but the increase, Nancy, with the sales tax and what's come in, based on what the estimates were, there's enough there on the next fiscal year to fund one moving forward. That's correct.
It's not in our budget right now, is it?
Say that again.
It's not in the budget right now.
No, he's saying it's not in the budget right now. And my question, I don't know if Holly can answer, how is this going to impact staffing? Are we going to see anything, you know, a reduction in the ambassador program, or you don't think so, guys?
Holly,
Yeah, so Terry, I think Chance had outlined in the FY23, this MSD budget recommendation table that he gave us, keeping the MSD contract, the professional services contract, the same with WDI for supplying the ambassadors and the street outreach and the program as we've been running it. However, I will say that, you know, obviously it's up to the MSD Advisory Committee on how those funds are spent within the budget. And if the MSD Advisory Committee decides to, you know, reallocate some out of ambassadors into police, or whatever you decide to do, I mean, it's completely up to this committee. And WDI is just, it's a professional services contract for us, so we want to make sure that we're doing what the committee and what the council wants us to do with the contract.
Yeah, Terry, the allocated portion for the professional services side of the MSD services remained the same in this recommended budget at $562,692.
Okay.
So are there any other questions of myself or Mr. City Manager or the or Chief Williams?
If not, I guess we need, someone would want a motion. Chance, is there any way of letting this be, giving this body say till next week to possibly call a special meeting to let all this digest?
I think that's certainly an option, Tom. If a motion is made, I'll have to check with the clerk on notice that's required in terms of putting a date on the calendar.
Okay.
The meeting to a time and date specific as your closing motion, you don't even have to advertise it. So in other words, if they just to a specific date and time, if they adjourn to a specific date.
Gotcha. Mr. Manager just told me if we adjourn to a specific date and time, we wouldn't even have to advertise that that special meeting. So.
Okay.
So a motion to adjourn to, example, a motion to adjourn to next Thursday at 3 p.m. or so forth.
Okay.
I move to postpone or continue until next Thursday, 3 p.m.
I second that, Terry. This is Elizabeth.
Okay. All in favor?
Wait, I didn't hear what date that we're supposed to do it. I had to get my.
What, 1 week from today, Nancy, at the same time?
28.
All right. Gotcha. Okay.
Hey, Hey, Vice Chair Tom, just a note when we adjourn the meeting at the end today, we'll have to repeat what Terry said for that motion to adjourn to Thursday at 3 p.m. of next week. So we can continue our current meeting, action items, updates, and then at the end, don't fully adjourn until, Thursday at 3 p.m.
Gotcha. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor to postpone this until next Thursday at the same time?
May I ask, is that all virtual, or will it also be in council chambers? We would need to find out if that's available.
I think everybody's okay with virtual, aren't they? I would assume so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it would be easier to discuss it.
Got it. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. So do we have it? So all in favor of postponing until next week?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And that'll be the plan. All right, moving on to the next action item we have, MSD services, RFP recommendations for WDI.
Thanks, Tom. I'll kick this off and be as quick and cognizant of everyone's time as we can. So this is WDI's contract. City put an RFP out on March the 14th, I believe, or March the 15th. Proposals due April the 14th, which is last Thursday. City received one proposal from Holly and her team at WDI to provide the continuing ongoing services for the next 5-year contract. The budget that was allocated and utilized as kind of the budget reflection through this process was what was presented to the committee both last year and in writing in its recent documents of the 562692. So with that, I'll just hand it over to Holly real quick and just to briefly go over what her proposal included. I think for the most part, most of the line items are very similar to what you've seen in this current year's budget, with some minor changes to some services and just some minor allocations with supplies.
Thanks, Chance. Yes, we did submit the proposal on the 4th, so in case there were any questions or, just to kind of get the proposal in a bit early, it is very similar to the budget proposal for the previous contract. We did ask that the contract be extended to the maximum of 5 years, that be allocated to a 5-year contract rather than a 2 or 3 year contract, as we had done previously, just to make sure that we had the consistency in terms of equipment and personnel. This proposal that we submitted is for the first year of MSD operations, and as Chance mentioned, it's based on, just as we always do, the budget is built around last year's receipts, so it is that same 562 number. In the approved budget, or the draft budget that we had presented, you can see that the assessment revenue was based upon last year's revenue. The personnel, we are showing 6.6 full-time equivalent ambassadors, and we've got halved between the clean and safe budget line items, the full-time street outreach position. And we did have to get, and I know this was a subject of some discussion, we have a leased truck now coming in from Block by Block that is a newer truck, a 2017, to replace our 2006 truck that WDI owned. We did also, again, just based on our previous conversations with the MSD committee, take out of this year's budget the hanging baskets. As you know, that was about a $6,000 direct expense on those baskets. Never mind the amounts of time, and we had tracked that. It was about $12,000, total cost, $10,000 to $12,000, depending on the watering and the heat and the season. So we feel like that'll give us more flexibility in things like the facade grants that have been hugely successful. Again, be able to fund up to 10 total projects in facade grants. And then the other expenses are, we did not have to develop again the vision platform. We have that down to a $3,000 expense this year. You'll remember that during the development from last year, that was a larger expense. But we are very similar to last year's budget with just a few small changes, and glad to answer any questions about the budget or the proposal.
And I'd just like to add to the committee, with the committee's motion to support the award of this contract, this is most likely set to be going to council at its second May agenda meeting under the public hearing section for award.
So if there are no other comments or questions for Holly or Chance, is there a motion to approve?
I put forward a motion to approve. This is Chris Clark.
A second?
William, are you second? Thumbs up, right?
Thumbs up the second, there you
Okay.
So we have our second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So that is done, so we are on to reports.
Lieutenant, I think you're up.
Okay. We've, in the past month, the issues that we're dealing with right now is B&E Autos downtown. Basically in the area of the Hotel Ballast, we have provided some of our unmarked plainclothes assets down there. They're working hand in hand with the Ballast for the past week and a half, trying to get a beat on the guys that are doing that. The main thing that's being targeted down there are firearms. They're being left in vehicles in plain sight, and that's what's the hot topic right now. As Chief said, we have recovered quite a few downtown in the past, month and a half, but it's going to happen. Also, we made an arrest, Bonnie's and Husk. There was an individual that some property damage to Husk. He left there and went to Bonnie's, broke in, did some property damage, and really tried to start a fire and burn the place. He's been arrested, and he is still sitting in jail. He is one of our unhoused individuals that was just dealing with some things, and he's on a pretty steep bond. I don't think he's going to be an issue for a while. Downtown crowds, they're as normal. They're pretty heavy on Friday and Saturday nights in particular. Again, Jack Morris, I can't say how blessed we are to have him the past couple months. He's made a huge difference for us. I know that was brought up earlier also. As recent as yesterday, I'm able to call him and say, hey, do you know who this is? Can you get up with him for us? And he handles it. Within an hour or two, we have it handled, and like I said, we're very thankful to have his help. Azalea Fest weekend, there were no major issues downtown that we could reported. It actually went pretty smooth. And last thing is, we had an individual jump in the water. We've actually had two in the past 30 days. The guy last month, an officer was talking to, we had 3 officers talking to him when he jumped. We do have throw ropes and life preservers in some of the trunks of the vehicles for downtown task force, but at that time it was happened so fast that all he had was a water hose from a boat nearby that he tried to throw to the man before he eventually drowned. Since then, we've purchased 8 throw ropes specifically designed as water rescue ropes. We've distributed them to all 8 of our officers downtown. Ideally, what we would like to do is purchase some cabinet-style boxes and have the ropes stored in. We'd like these kits to be mounted on several of the poles that have been numbered that we worked on. The kit locations could then be provided to the 911 center. This way, if one of our Wilmington or city employees weren't familiar with where a box was, while they were dealing with 911, they could direct them to the corresponding numbered pole and provide a combination if that's necessary. So that's another thing. The cabinets are going to have to be locked, so they're not tampered with by some of the individuals down here that are visiting on the weekends. In extreme events, if there's no fire department or PD employee present, a civilian could call 911 and they could be directed to the pole and number so we can get some help. Like I said, we have 8 now. We have a meeting the first or second week of May with Dave Mays to provide, the schematics of the boxes and where they would be placed. And, hopefully we'll have that done as soon as possible with the summertime coming. So other than that, everything's smooth.
Great, thank you.
Holly, you might be up. WDI, quick update. And
Okay.
I'll take
Sorry about that.
Sure, I don't want to take too much time. I know we're tight for time, but I first want to say that I greatly appreciate the MSD Advisory Committee, this group approving WDI's extended contract with the city and providing that service to the MSD. I'm especially appreciative of the fact that we're going to get to continue through that budget, if this budget is approved by council as it exists, to continue the street outreach program that Lieutenant Nichols mentioned. We think that's getting tremendous results, so thanks again for your support for that. And then very lastly, I would say, just to let the committee know that the last facade improvement grant committee meeting is coming up on May 3rd. We have 3 applications currently to review. We may be getting a 4th one of those in just before the committee meeting, but going to get that out to the committee. Again, want to make the offer if anyone else wants to be engaged from the MSD Advisory Committee in that process. We're happy to extend that invitation for you to be part of the committee. Committee review then will allow us to supply up to two more applicants with facade grants. It's up to $5,000 depending upon the size of the project and whether they do 1 facade or 2. I think a couple of the applicants, though, are currently $5,000 requests. So it will depend on which ones are selected, whether it's 1 or 2 more that we'll fund for this fiscal year. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have another $25,000 in the budget, if approved, for facade grants for next year. So that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Holly.
All right, Tom, I'll take a quick lightning round on the city side. Big streetscaping project, 200 North Front Street, commenced this week with the closure and mobilization at the corner of Grace and Front, and then the full closure of, or at least on the street side, of 200 North Front. Sidewalks remain open. City and contractor are working diligently with Terry and her team at the DBA, as well as the reps and merchants and business owners at the Cotton Exchange to do everything we can to help minimize impacts there with signage, publications, and so on. Bijou Park is nearing its completion. I think the only thing waiting currently is 3 to 4 lighting posts. They are on order. Unfortunately, I believe back order. So I think we're at least a few weeks away from fully opening up Bijou Park to the public there, but we are nearing the end. And then just 2nd Street deck CIP and rehab project over there at the parking deck continues and is expected to continue until July, August of this year.
Great. Thank you, Chance. So I know we're on a time crunch to get you guys out of there by 4, and I think we're a little over, so.
And just reminder, Vice Chair, to adjourn until that.
Yep, so we will be, so if no other comments, we will adjourn till next Thursday at 3 o'clock, which is
28th.
28th, thank you. We will adjourn until next week, the 28th at 3 p.m. All right.
Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks,
See everybody next week. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep.